Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here. A few years ago, I was given a bag of old 20 gauge shotgun shells that belonged to my great uncle. And at the time, I did not have a 20 gauge shotgun, and neither did anybody else in my family. So I used that opportunity to actually buy a 20 gauge shotgun. I bought my Maverick 88 20 gauge, and it's a pretty good gun. So, I still have most of the old shotgun shells here. I've shot a few of them over the years, but I still have quite a few of them in here. And if you look in here, there's some of these 3-inch Super X 20 gauge shells, and I was just recently given all these 3-inch shells, and then also this little red one, which if you didn't know, 20 gauge is usually yellow. So if you find an old red 20 gauge shell, you know it's pretty old, because I don't know if very many companies make non-yellow 20 gauge shotgun shells. But anyway, I was just recently given some more 20 gauge shells because people that I know don't have 20 gauges, but I was also given a bag of 16 gauge shotgun shells. Now I do have a couple of 16 gauges, a couple of old Winchesters, one of them being a family heirloom. And I went through this bag and saw that some of these shotgun shells are they're Magnum shells. Now 16 gauge is only in 2 3/4. I'm not aware of any 16 gauge shotgun shells made longer than 2 3/4, but there are still more high powered loads out there. And then also there's some pretty old and little questionable shotgun shells in here. So I wasn't really willing to put this questionable ammunition through either one of my old Winchesters, just because they're really nice shotguns, and I really don't want to take the risk of blowing one of them up if I come across a pretty nuclear shotgun shell. Not that I expect that I will, but just in case, I did not want to shoot those shells through either one of my Winchesters. So I decided to go out and buy this. A Western Field 550B. Now, if you don't know what a Western Field 550B is, it's basically a Mossberg 500 that was made to be sold by Montgomery Ward. And I don't even know if Montgomery Ward is still a store anymore. I don't know a whole lot about Montgomery Ward and where they were. But anyway, a lot of old hardware stores like Sears and Montgomery Ward and other stores had their own store name brand of rifles and shotguns back in the day. And Western Field was Mossberg rifles and shotguns that they sold from Montgomery Ward. So anyway, this gun is pretty old. It's made in the 60s. Now, the way you can tell is, number one, it only has one action bar. Now, Mossberg wasn't able to put dual action bars on their original Mossberg 500s because back in the 60s, Remington still had the patent for it, and until the patent ran out in the 70s, they had to stick with just one action bar. So that's one way it's made in the 60s. But also, it does not have a serial number. The serial number would normally be on this side of the receiver, and shotguns were not required by law to have serial numbers until 1968. So that tells me it was made somewhere between 1961 and 1968. And in fact, I think the 16 gauge, I read somewhere, the 16 gauge wasn't made until 1963, as far as the Mossberg 500 16 gauge. And I'm not really sure when they stopped making them, but basically what this gun is just a Mossberg 500B. Now, one thing about Mossbergs, at least back in the day, is they labeled each different gauge of shotgun as a different model number. So the B in 16, or the B in 550B or 500B designates that it's a 16 gauge shotgun. So the 500A was a 12 gauge, B was 16, the C was a 20 gauge, There was supposed to be a D in 28 gauge that was never made, and I'm not really sure why. And then the E was the 410. So that's just kind of interesting. They don't really do it that way anymore. There's something that's kind of interesting, but this is a pretty interesting shotgun in my opinion. It does have a wooden stock and forend. It has the corn cob style forend, which is a little bit different than the rest of my Mossbergs. I guess they had different styles throughout the years, but somebody painted it green, and I guess it was actually kind of like a camouflage, because you can kind of see like hints of brown in there, but it might have faded or something. But I kind of like it. It's just something different, not something that you see every day. And green is my favorite color. Another thing about this is the safety button or safety switch is metal, and it appears to be steel, so that's kind of cool. You don't see that on Mossberg 500s anymore. And the trigger housing, I think, is aluminum, but I'm not 100% sure. The bolt and the shell lifter are jeweled, so that's kind of cool. And the barrel is a 24-inch slug barrel. So it is a smooth bore, but it has the rifle sights on it for a slug. So you can shoot slugs through it. So it's basically a deer hunting shotgun. There's no drilled and tapped or anything like that, all the modern features that you see on shotguns these days. But other than that, it's just a basic Mossberg 500. You have your tang safety, you have your action release down here. And one thing that I think is really cool about Mossberg 500 16 gauges, if you ever find one, is the fact that a lot of the parts are actually interchangeable with the 12 gauge model. So I'm not exactly sure which parts are and which parts aren't, but like the stocks and forends, I believe, are the trigger group might be, and some internal components as well. The mag tube, I think, is. And just a few. I think there's really only a few things that are not interchangeable with the 12 gauge. If you look on Numerich gun parts, you can go down the list of parts for the Mossberg 500, and it'll actually say like this part is for 12 and 16 gauge, and some of them are even for 12, 16, and 20 gauge. So it really just depends on the part. But a lot of the parts are interchangeable, and I think even the slide action tube assembly is interchangeable. Now, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't taken this all apart and like compared all the parts and everything with one of my other shotguns, but I would imagine if the slide action tube assembly is interchangeable, and if you break your action bar, you could probably just take a modern production slide action tube assembly and just cut one of the arms off, and that would solve your problem. I have not attempted to try that or anything. I don't have a reason to right now, but I would imagine that would be the case. Now, eventually I am going to take this gun apart and one of my other Mossberg 500s or Maverick 88s or something, and I'll just kind of compare the parts and see exactly what they look like, and I may do my own video on that. But as far as I know, there are still a lot of parts in this shotgun that you could swap out with modern production Mossberg 500 parts. Obviously, the barrel is going to be different. The bolt is going to be different. All the things that have to deal with the actual firing of the shell and making it so that it doesn't blow the gun up. But the stocks, the forends, the mag tube, I think, some of the internal parts, are interchangeable. So, and it will indicate whether it or not it is interchangeable on Numerich gun parts if you need parts for your 16 gauge Mossberg 500. So that is just one reason why I thought that the Western Field 550B was a good choice for a 16 gauge. I do like it. It does not have sentimental value to me, but I still think it's a good gun. So hopefully none of those shotgun shells blow up in my face, but you know, gotta actually shoot them to find out. But I hope that's not the case. But anyway, I think it's a pretty good deal for a shotgun. And if I didn't say it already, I got it for $280, and I bought it from Wild West Guns. If you don't know who Wild West Guns are as a company, they take Marlin 1895s and they totally customize them and give them a complete makeover and turn them into these really awesome custom lever action guns for like bush pilots and Alaskan guides and stuff like that. And they're really cool rifles, but they're really expensive. But they also do a lot of buy, sell, and trade on Gunbroker, and that's where I found this gun. And they have quite a few other guns on Gunbroker, so if you ever come across them, they're very professional. They're very easy to deal with. So if you ever find a gun that you like that they're selling, give them a shot. But anyway, that's the Western Field Model 550B 16 gauge shotgun, otherwise known as a Mossberg 500 16 gauge shotgun. Subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm Redneck Mini 14, and until next time, be safe.